How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another first Descendant video. Now today we're going to be covering the highly requested Valby in-depth in-game guide. Now I've spent more time testing these mods in this build than I did on Kyle, because there's so many numbers to test and there's so many different mods to test. This was all tested live on twitch.tv/EEFANN. There was some off-stream testing, but a majority of it, especially the end testing for all the end mods that I decided to go with, is live over on Twitch. If you want to go watch, stop by. I might be live as you're watching this. Anyways, let's not waste any more time and let's jump straight into it. So we're going to go to the Descendant module, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about Valby's abilities. We're going to start with the passive because it's very easy to explain and it's very straightforward. Water intake. When using skills while on water, MP cost decreases. The decrease amount is by 30%. You see there on the right. Puddles created by skills are also considered to be water. So this means that any water you leave on the ground, which all of your skills do leave water, you're going to get a 30% decrease to the amount of mana or MP, mana, however you say it, MP cost. This also applies to any water in the game on the ground. Now, if I back out here, you'll see the same place all the passives are. Next to your fourth ability, there is a smaller hexagon, and this tells you when your passive ability is either off cooldown. Now, Valby doesn't have a cooldown, but it will glow and show you that it is active. So you'll know that you're getting the MP reduction when it's glowing. Now that we're back to our abilities, we're going to start with the first ability, Bubble Bullet. Now, all of Valby's abilities are non-attribute, and they scale off non-attribute mods, or any type of non-attribute modifier. Now, along with non-attribute, we have 2 fusion and 2 dimension. Our fusions are going to be Bubble Bullet and Laundry Bomb, and our dimensions are Plop and Cleanup. This will be important when we get to the mods because I'll explain a couple things and some boring math behind why we went with some of the mods we went with. But for now, we're just going to explain the ability. So skill description. Fires a bouncing bubble bullet. Where the bubble bullet impacts, it creates a small puddle at the point of collision. Enemies who touch the small puddle take continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. The bubble bullet explodes upon hitting an enemy or after bouncing a maximum number of times, dealing burst damage on nearby enemies. Burst damage increases with the number of times bubble bullet bounces. Now, if we look over here at the basic info, what's very important to know, and like I said, this will tie into the mods I chose, is that you get a burst damage, so skill power times 469.5% modifier. So your base skill power times a modifier, and the modifier number is increased by skill power modifier mods, non-attribute or fusion skill power modifier mods to be precise. The burst damage is very high. Now there's a couple issues with Bubble Bullet, and it's the reason that I recommended you go with Waterplay for the beginner's guide for Valby. I almost recommend going with Waterplay here as well, but there's a couple conditions that can happen that cause Bubble Bullet to blow Waterplay out of the water, no pun intended, out of the water in terms of damage. The problem is, and you can choose for yourself what you want to do, there's going to be a couple modifications you can make to this build to tie into how you want to play. But the conditions that need to be met is maximum range for Bubble Bullet. So you need the max amount of bounces, and I'll show you exactly what that range is. And you need your target to stand in the damage over time pool. Now this can be troublesome because, well, everything moves. On top of that, it's very hard when you're in the middle of combat to understand how far the Bubble Bullet actually bounces, unless you're just a Valby pro. It took a lot of time for me to understand the range of the bouncing. So if you can meet these 2 conditions, and you do not have to have them stand in the entire DOT, there is some leniency for how long they stand in the DOT because of how strong the burst damage is from Bubble Bullet. But again, if you decide to opt for Waterplay, there's not much damage loss happening. Again, unless you can reach or meet, both of those conditions. And one more time, I'll tell you, the condition is max bounces with burst damage and full amount of DOT time. So I'm going to back out real quick and show you guys how far it is in the range that you can bounce Bubble Bullet to get the maximum amount of damage. Now it's very precise, so you need to be standing at this. So this right here would not count as maximum range. So I have to back up to here. This is exactly max range for Bubble Bullet bouncing, and this is what's going to give me the maximum amount of damage. So you see there, I got 190k from my explosion. Now I'm going to step forward and I'm going to show you guys the explosion difference or the damage difference just based off this short amount of range that I change. So if I step forward to the black line here, Okay, well that was a crit, so that doesn't count. We don't count the crits. But it's good to see that our crit mods are working. Let's go away. Bounce again. So 171.3k. So you see the difference is from 190 to 171 with just a small distance changed. So again, this is why I stress that it's very important that you keep the maximum distance for your bubble bullet bounce in order to get more impact than water play. And if I back up and show you water play really quickly, we're going to keep it on the same build. We just remove emergency measures, excuse me, the water play. Now I'm going to quickly note real quick for you guys. Keep this in mind that all of Valby's abilities are on a 1 second interval. Now, essentially what this means is if you have a 14.2 second duration, you're going to get 14 damage ticks from whatever ability you use because it's 1 tick per second. The only difference in these abilities, or the only outlier in these abilities, is the cleanup ability. The reason is you get an initial burst damage that counts as a tick. It does the same amount of damage as a tick. And when I say a tick, I mean a tick of damage by sliding through the enemies. And I'm at 21.3 seconds here, so I'm going to get 21 ticks. So this is going to translate to 22 ticks of damage if you slide directly through the enemy. So just keep that in mind. So if I go here, it's going to do 14 ticks of 34,400 damage. So if we did the quick math here, and we did 34,400 times 14, we're going to get 481,600. So you're getting 481,600 damage just by simply using water play. Now this takes away the difficulty factor of having to bounce it at maximum range. And I'll show you guys really quickly what it looks like if you just bubble bullet directly in front of them. We'll also do the math here to show you exactly the difference in damage. So remember, 481k for water play. And with bubble bullet, you have 76,157. So we'll do 76,100. Plus 15,000 times. Now this is a little different. Remember I said it's on a 1 second interval. So we would go to bubble bullet and we see that it's a 14 second duration. But you have to multiply this times 2 because the burst and the DOT create a double tick. So it's 15,000 times 28 instead of 14. And that's going to give you 496,100. So if you're following the math, you lose 9,800 damage by using water play over bubble bullet if you decide to use bubble bullet in a close range playstyle. So if you're up close with the boss or you're not able to get the maximum bounces, you're going to be losing a very minimal amount of damage by switching to water play, and you're going to gain that ease of use. So choose for yourself. Bubble bullet is the higher damaging ability. It does produce more damage over time, more DPS in general. So you can pick what you want to do there. If you want to take, again, the ease of use or the higher damage, the choice is yours. Now, before we move on from bubble bullet, now that I've explained everything in depth for you guys, I just want to say quickly, there is going to be some difficulty with the terrain. If the terrain is any sort of elevated, or if there's a little bump or any kind of, literally any difference in the terrain besides flat, the bubble bullet will occasionally bug out and go the wrong way. It won't go anywhere near your target. So you just need to keep all of this in mind when you decide to use bubble bullet. Again, you're going to be having a more difficult time actually targeting something with bubble bullet because it will just go all over the place. But if you get bubble bullet to hit, you're going to get a very big boost of damage compared to using water play. So overall, I think it's the better option in terms of DPS. Just remember that it is going to be much harder to use. Another thing is, if you jump while using bubble bullet, you're going to reduce the velocity, and I'll show you this really quickly. So if we just start it from here, we throw it, you can see that it hits the Slayer. Now I'm not going to wait for the damage over time because this isn't going to hit him most likely. So if I jump and throw bubble bullet, you see how it did not reach him. Okay, so keep in mind that if you jump while using it, even if you're running, like if you're running around and you do one of these, you're going to reduce the velocity of it by a lot and it won't reach him. Just keep that in mind. Now moving on from bubble bullet, we have Plop. Now Plop is a very fun ability and there's a couple things that you need to know about it. So we'll read the description first and then I'll explain to you guys in depth what it is. Skill description. Forms a big puddle at a designated location. Emerges from the big puddle and inflicts knockdown on nearby enemies. Enemies standing in the big puddle receive continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. The skill's cooldown decreases proportionally to the number of enemies inflicted with knockdown. So if you look over here underneath basic info on the right, on hitting enemy, you get a 1.5 second cooldown per enemy hit. So if you were to hit 8 enemies with a Plop, you're going to get a 12-second cooldown reduction. The cooldown itself is 18.1. If you hit enough enemies, you can get a full reset on your Plop. So if you group up the ads or you have a big group of ads, remember that you can use this and you'll get an instant reset on your ability. Now, Big Puddle's damage, and keep in mind there is a little typo here. It says Bug Puddle. I'm almost positive it's supposed to say Big Puddle. Anyways, Big Puddle has a continuous damage, which is your skill power times 28%. This is enhanced by skill power modifiers, and skill power modifiers are very strong on an ability like this because there's already a low modifier. However, the fusion modifier produces more DPS over the dimension modifier, even though it's a smaller percentage and is being increased more. So 28% plus 18%, you know what I mean? It should translate to a larger number. However, it only increases the damage over time, and the damage over time is not the best. Not on Plop. So overall, fusion modifiers, skill power modifiers, produce more DPS than the dimension modifiers. The duration of the puddles in which you leave, and you leave 2, 1 from where you're standing and 1 to where you go. The duration is going to be 21.3 seconds for those puddles, and the range is going to be a 6-meter radius. This is increasable. It's by 200%, which means you can get a max of 12 meters. When we get to the modding, you'll see why my radius is only 6 meters, but I'll explain what you should do and why you should do it. And then the laundry debuff lasts for 28.4 seconds. Laundry is a very important mechanic when it comes to Valby. Now, Valby's abilities all inflict laundry. Laundry not only ties into your laundry launcher, but it also ties into the 20% electric resist decrease. So what this means is you give anything you afflict with laundry is going to have a 20% damage reduction to electric damages and non-attribute damages. And that's of all types, weapon, ability, etc. It doesn't matter. So the boss, if you hit them with laundry, or the ads, if you inflict them with laundry, they're going to take 20% more damage from electric and non-attribute damage types. Okay? And this applies to all of her abilities. Every single one of her abilities cause this. They afflict laundry as long as you're hitting them with the water. And again, this will tie back into your laundry launcher here in a minute. Now we have cleanup. Cleanup is one of your stronger abilities. The damage over time is very strong for cleanup. Along with, as I said earlier in the video, when you initially slide through the enemies, they also receive the same damage over time number, so an extra tick of the damage over time, and it's very, very strong. Not only that, but the duration on this is very high, which means you can make a lot of space or cover a lot of space with water by using this ability. Along with this being one of your best abilities, you also get a very nice 1000 movement speed buff, and to top it off, you get a 50% damage reduction when you're in liquefied state, so when you're sliding around. Keep in mind that you cannot jump when you're using this ability. You are tied to the ground and you can only move. So if there's any little ledge in front of you, good luck getting over it. You're going to have to cancel the ability. But the ability can be canceled by pressing the activation key again, and you'll instantly get out of the ability. Now, the reason this ability is so strong and the DOT is so good is because it's a skill power times 138.5% skill power modifier. So the damage number is jacked way up. You get damage intervals of 1 second, like all of her abilities, and the duration of the water which you leave on the ground is 21.3 seconds. The range on mine is 2 meters by 2 meters because I don't have a range mod, and we'll get to that in the modding, but the max expendable range is 200%, which means you could get to a 4x4 meter radius, which is a lot of area covered by water. And again, this afflicts laundry, which is her main mechanic, so all of her abilities regarding water, which is obviously everything, afflicts laundry to everything touched by the water. Now moving on to her final ability is Laundry Bomb. The skill description states, equip a unique weapon. It will be unequipped when the duration ends or all bullets have been used. The projectile impact of the unique weapon creates a Laundry Bomb, dealing continuous damage and inflicting toad on nearby enemies with laundry. So any enemy afflicted with laundry gets the toad debuff, or basically what this means is they get sucked into this bubble. The range of the suck on this bubble is 8 meters. This is increasable by 200%, which means the max range on this ability could be 16 meters. So if you maxed out your range, you would be able to pull in enemies afflicted by laundry at a 16-meter radius, which is very, very, very good. Continuous damage increases based on the number of enemies with laundry. So the more enemies you have sucked into this bubble, the more damage it does. You get 3 shots or a 28.4-second duration. You are able to use other abilities while you have this cannon out. So if you activate Laundry Bomb, and then you don't have any enemies afflicted with Laundry yet, what I like to do is activate the Laundry Bomb, shoot one of the bubbles, and then activate my cleanup and go around hitting enemies. And then the enemies that I'm hitting with the water are instantly sucked into the bubble, and it starts doing damage to them. And then I shoot another one, and then I'll do Plop Plop or whatever ability I'm feeling, depending on the scenario. And everything that's getting hit by this water is getting sucked into the bubble. Now, 28.4 seconds is a very long time. You have more than enough time to use your abilities to afflict them with Laundry, or you could go around and afflict everything with Laundry and then pull out your cannon, whatever works for you. But I've noticed that ads do tend to die when you're in group activities pretty fast, especially when you have those crazy bunny players running around, absolutely nuking everything AoE-wise. So use the ability as you please, but that's the way I like to use it. Now the damage is a skill power times a 39.1% modifier. Again, this can be increased by a fusion skill power modifier. This is not the craziest damage dealing ability. It's nice, but it's more of a crowd control thing. So you're not going to get insane damage out of it, but you do get good damage. Everything on Valby does have very good damage. The duration is 4.4 seconds, so that means every bubble is a 4.4 second duration. And the continuous damage range is 2 meters. Very small, but it's the inside of the bubble. That's all it's saying. And the max damage increase is 200%. So there's a 25% damage increase per enemy sucked in. So if you have 4 enemies sucked in, you're at 100% damage increase. You can suck in 8 enemies max for a 200% damage increase. And again, this also inflicts Laundry upon your enemies. Now that we've been over all of her abilities, and if you have any questions about the abilities whatsoever, or you're not understanding something I'm saying, feel free to use the comment section below. I will be in the comment section answering every single question you guys ask. Or, as I said, I stream over on Twitch. I may be live. You can come ask me while I'm live, and you can get a live answer from me. And that's at twitch.tv/EFANN. Anyways, moving on, we're going to move straight into the mods. So as you can see here, these are the mods that I decided to go with. There is going to be some changes I would recommend, or not changes, but I'm going to explain to you why I chose each mod. And I'm going to explain to you the alternatives or what I would slot in next. As you can see, I only have 57 module capacity. That's because I'm not level 40, I'm level 33. However, it wouldn't matter if I was at module capacity 60 because I wouldn't be able to slot in any other mods regardless. However, if you were to put a energy activator into Valby, or you were to use crystallization catalysts, which I have done one, but if you were to do more, you would be able to fit the mods that I'm going to recommend easily. So first and foremost, we're going to start with the skill modules. As you can see, I'm not running one. I already went over why I don't use water play or why I would use water play. Choose for yourself. Now, the other 2 mods that I would use for Valby's Transcendent mods are Supply Moisture and Singing Water. Now, if you've been tuned into the stream at all, you would have seen that my RNG has been absolutely atrocious. So I'm not able to display these mods for you, but I can tell you what they do, and then I can tell you why I would or where I would use them. So we'll start with Singing Water. Let's back out here, and we're going to go to Access Info, Modules, Singing Water. So Singing Water spawns a seduction of water where the unique weapon's bullet explodes. Until it is destroyed, the spawn seduction of water taunts surrounding monsters and inflicts the Laundry effect on them. So this changes the way your Laundry cannon works, and it is basically a big AoE attraction or a aggro grabber. So instead of sucking the enemies in, you're going to be attracting the enemies, which kind of works in the same way essentially, but this would be good for very big mobs. And if you weren't running any other Transcendent mod, this would just be a convenience type of use or just maybe something fun to mess around with. This obviously has no effect on boss fights. I mean, there are those little ads that spawn. If you feel like that's a problem for you, you can use that to keep them off of you. It could be useful. Sometimes the Kingfishers can be annoying as hell and they just spin and knock you around and they're just a nuisance. So this could be useful there because you can't use this ability on bosses anyways because they obviously can't be sucked into the water. So maybe that'd be useful for aggroing the ads to keep them off your team when you need a res or something. And then the next one's going to be Supply Moisture. So Supply Moisture states, while on water, increases skill critical hit rate, skill duration, and firearm attribute trigger rate. Reduction of MP consumption does not apply. Now, the reduction of MP is not anything spectacular anyways, so losing that isn't the biggest deal. The problem is that you have to be standing on your water. This can be troublesome because there's a lot of moving around in boss fights and stuff, but if you're able to keep the aggro on someone else and you are able to create a big area of space with like your Plop or your cleanup, this is obviously very nice because you just get a free increase to skill critical hit rate and duration, along with the firearm attribute trigger rate. And firearm attribute trigger rate, for those that don't know, if you had an electricity status on your weapon, it increases the rate at which the electricity will proc, so essentially making the electricity proc more often. And then skill critical hit rate obviously increases the rate at which you crit with your skills, and then duration is how long your abilities last. So supply moisture could be a very good Transcendent mod to slot in. However, no Transcendent mod is needed for Valby. It is not like you're going to be getting blown out by another Valby in terms of DPS if you do not run one. It's up to you what you want to use, but I would recommend supply moisture and then singing water next. And again, I already went over water play, so choose what you would like to use for that. Now that we've been over the skill module or the Transcendent mods, for the sub module, I use long distance maneuvering because I like the extra 5 meters you get. Personal choice. If you want to use shock punch, which is what I use for a long time, you can use shock punch. You know, it's cool, kind of plays hand in hand with the electricity debuff you give to enemies, etc., etc. Or you could use dual claw if you want to have a AoE slash and get rid of like enemies around you. I believe short sword also has a nice AoE effect on it for meleeing ads. However, I don't ever use my sub. I rarely find myself using my sub attack anyways. I'm sure you guys are the same, but if you're a sub attack enthusiast, I would recommend dual claw or short sword. And if you're like me and you just want the utility, long distance maneuvering or midair maneuvering, keep in mind midair maneuvering did have some bugs. When you're on bosses, it would grapple the air and not the weak point, so that could be kind of troublesome. But again, the sub module does not matter as long as you have it maxed out, because maxing it out gives you more capacity to slot more mods. And starting from the top, we have emergency measures. Now, I obviously don't have the space to max this out, but you would want to max this out. This gives you the skill critical hit rate and the skill critical hit damage, which is never bad in any scenario. So this is always good, and it's nice that it has both of them because each of these go hand in hand. Every time you increase one, you want to increase the other. You don't want to go all into one and not into the other. You want to make sure you're splitting up the amount of skill critical hit rate and skill critical hit damage that you apply to your mods. Or I should say that you apply to your Descendant would be the better way to say it. Now, for focus on non-attribute, I obviously have this one maxed out, and I actually messed up when I maxed this one out. Now, this is not bad. If you're the type of person that really likes skill cooldowns, and having your ability off cooldown is very important to you, then focus on non-attribute isn't bad. However, after doing the math, it comes out to a 1.5 second decrease on all of your abilities. So that means that with the setup I have now, by applying the non-attribute focus on non-attribute mod, I get a minus 1.5 second cooldown for all my abilities. Now that's roughly, it changes from ability to ability, but the median of it is 1.5 seconds. And that's just to make it simpler for you guys to understand. It's essentially 1.5. There's like 1.8, 1.3. It doesn't really matter, but roughly 1.5 seconds on all abilities by using the focus on non-attribute mod. Now, what I would slot in here, instead of focus on non-attribute, is non-attribute master. As you can see, I did some testing with it. This one, along with the base focus on non-attribute, because they're around the same percent increase. And non-attribute master came out on top. Now, it wasn't by a lot, but it was by a good bit. So to give you guys some of the boring numbers, with a base non-attribute master and a base focus on non-attribute, base non-attribute master was hitting 139k with bubble bullet, and focus on non-attribute base was hitting 134k. So it's about a minus 5k from going focus on non-attribute or by using focus on non-attribute, and it's a plus 5k for using non-attribute master. So to simplify that, if it's confusing at all, non-attribute master gives you plus 5,000 damage to your bubble bullet alone. Now the total damage of bubble bullet with non-attribute master is 353,000. And the total damage of bubble bullet with non-attribute or focus on non-attribute was 339,500. So again, the damage isn't crazy, but it is definitely better. And for a 1.5 second cooldown trade-off, to me, the 1.5 seconds is nothing because it's not increasing your DPS by that much. Although you can stack damage over times. So for instance, what I mean is if you did a bubble bullet and then you threw another bubble bullet, the puddles would overlap. So you can stack the damage over times. The 1.5 seconds won't change the amount of times that you can stack the damage over times. But again, choose for yourself. The damage difference isn't anything crazy. It's not substantial. So if you like the 1.5 second cooldown for all your abilities, then go for focus on non-attribute. But if you don't care about the cooldowns, then go for non-attribute master. And for time distribution, you get a skill cooldown of minus 14.3 and a max HP of 52.4. Valby is one of the Descendants that comes with a very high base HP stat. Shield is not very good in the first Descendant. The defense does not apply to it, so your shield is very weak. So going for health and defense is very nice. Going for health on Valby because she already has a base high HP stat is the way that I like to go. Fusion Specialist. Now this is where I'm going to get into a couple of numbers for you, and I'm going to explain why I use Fusion Specialist over Dimension Specialist. So with a complete build, the numbers for Fusion Specialist is as follows. Bubble Bullet at max range with damage over times plus cleanup is 838,079 damage. Now Dimension Specialist with Bubble Bullet with the same following conditions, Bubble Bullet at max range with max DOTs and cleanup is 830,500. So Fusion Specialist wins by around 8k. Nothing crazy, but this is where it makes a big difference. So Bubble Bullet with Plop using Fusion Specialist is 580,800 damage. Now with Dimension Specialist, Bubble Bullet with Plop, and again, Bubble Bullet at max range with the DOTs, combined with Plop, with Dimension Specialist is only 433,940. So Fusion Specialist gives you an extra 150k DPS, approximately. The actual number is 147, but rounding up to 150k. So Fusion Specialist gives you another 147k damage when you're combining Bubble Bullet with Plop, and it gives you an 8k damage increase when combining Bubble Bullet with Cleanup. Now, when I'm using Dimension Specialist, Bubble Bullet alone with its maxed out conditions, again meaning max bounces and damage over time, with Dimension Specialist is 322,000. While using Fusion Specialist, it's 444,000. So a very big increase to the damage there. The reason this is happening is because if you look at Bubble Bullet and you look at the burst damage, it's the skill power times a 469.5% modifier. Modifiers are increased by modifier mods. This number is what increases by adding a modifier mod. Now, if it does not show on this table, what you do is you open your inventory, you press W on your keyboard or X on the controller, and you look here at these numbers. So these numbers are decimals, which translate into percentages. So 0.972 is 97.2%, and 0.062 is 6.2%, onward and onward. It works the same for all of the percentages. And if there's a 1, like the skill critical hit damage, this is 100%. So 81.7%. So 181.7% skill critical hit damage. Now moving back to our mods, as I was saying, the modifier that I'm using for Fusion Specialist, as you can see, is a 76.1% skill power modifier, Fusion skill power modifier. So this gives me 76.1% on top of the base skill power modifier for the burst damage. So the burst damage is what's carrying the Fusion Specialist over the Dimension Specialist mod. Now, after boring you with all these numbers in this math, the consensus is Fusion Specialist over Dimension Specialist in terms of damage over time in almost every single scenario. And to sum up all of the numbers, Dimension Specialist is a 1 million DPS. I'm not going to go over all the numbers behind that. It would make this too long. The most likely damage over time for a Valby player using the abilities would be 1 million DPS. Again, I'm not going to go over the numbers, but it's 1 million DPS using Dimension Spec and 1.1 million using Fusion Spec. And when I say Spec, I mean Specialist. So again, there's a 100k increase in damage over time using Fusion Specialist. So Fusion Specialist just wins in every single scenario. There's very, very few scenarios where Dimension wins. It's not worth using. Then we have increased HP. Again, as I said, you want to play into Valby's increased HP pool, and this is a very great mod to do that because you get a plus 218.5% max HP. And then skill extension for the 36.5 duration. The duration applies to the water left on the ground, along with the ability usage time, like cleanup gets the increased duration. It's the only one, along with the laundry bomb, So laundry bomb and cleanup get the increased use time, along with the increased water time. And what I mean by water time is the water that you leave on the ground by using cleanup. And that applies to obviously all of the abilities. Now, assuming you have 80 capacity, and you have the formas in your Valby, because Valby is going to be your main. She is also my main, by the way. However, due to making videos and such, I don't have the time to main her. I'm playing other Descendants, learning all of them, etc., etc. But if she is maxed out for you, or you have her decked out to where you have all of the mods, and for this setup, you would want to use a Xantic as a forma. And by forma, I mean crystallization catalyst. Forma is what I refer to it as from a Warframe term. However, as I was saying, the mods that I would recommend adding in, if you have more module capacity after adding all of these, and I'll move this so you can see all the mods, it's going to be MP Accelerant if MP is an issue for you. Not only that, but you also get a duration boost from using MP Accelerant. Front lines, which will give you skill critical chance and damage, which as I said is never bad. And Technician. Technician will give you a boost to all of your modifiers for all of your skills. And again, as I told you before, modifiers are when it says skill power times whatever percent number it is. Modifiers are added to the percentage number that is the skill power is being multiplied by. Sometimes it won't always show this value on the charts here. So as I said, you have to go back to your inventory, press W or X on controller, and you look at the modifiers here. They will translate to this graph for sure. Now that we've finished explaining all the math and all the boring numbers and everything behind the mods, and feel free to go to the comment section and tell me what mods you recommend I change and what your reasoning is for it. I love seeing other people's builds and the reason why they change these builds. That's one of the main things that I love about games like this, is all the build crafting and such. So feel free to leave a comment down below of how you would change these mods, if you would change anything at all. I always love seeing that. Anyways, let's jump straight into the guns I use. So the Thunder Cage goes hand in hand with the Laundry debuff because you get an increase electricity damage, and Thunder Cage obviously does electricity damage. So Thunder Cage is nice to just have not only as a DPS weapon, and I'll show you how I have it modded even though it's not souped out. This is how I have my Thunder Cage modded. You go action and reaction, rifling reinforcement, fire rate up, adventurer. Those are the ones you want for sure. These 4 mods. Electric priority you would not want, you would just want electric enhancement. However, I accidentally, when I was early in the game, went into electric priority. Now, this isn't necessarily the worst thing that ever happened. All you get is a reload time modifier, but reload time can make your weapon feel clunky, and reload time plays into the cycle time of how much damage you can do, which lowers your DPS. So yada yada, more numbers, but the reload time modifier decreases your DPS by a good amount. So these are the 4 mods that you want for sure, in my opinion. Now, there's obviously different ways to modify this Thunder Cage. There's build videos all over YouTube. I haven't watched any, but feel free to go watch one of those. Those will probably give you a better idea of how to actually deck out this thing. Then you have my main DPS weapon, which is the Tamer. Now, I have a YouTube video on how I mod this. As you can see, I'm not going to go over all the mods here because this is a build guide, not a weapon build guide, but just copy the mods you see here and upgrade as follows: rifling reinforcement, action and reaction, fire rate up, in that order. And now you're probably wondering why I have a level 84 shotgun here. This just plays into my reactor. However, I don't have the best reactor that I want, obviously because it's a shotgun weapon class optimization condition. But honestly, I would like a sniper rifle optimization condition for my playstyle, or maybe even a hand cannon. Anything other than what this is. I just don't like shotguns. I would take a machine gun, assault rifle to use my eternal willpower. Basically, this is the worst one I could get. However, this is the best one I have in slot right now, and I don't use my heavy weapon enough to actually care about having to slot in this shotgun. Now, I do have an ultimate Thunder Cage mounting optimization condition, and you may be wondering, well, why are you not using this one if you have the optimization condition because you're running Thunder Cage? Well, the reason is because it's a ultimate reactor. Ultimate reactors require you to be holding the weapon in your hand when using abilities to get the 160% skill power boost. I just do not want to do that. Thunder Cage is not my main DPS weapon. It's like I said, it's the tamer. So I'm not going to sit there and switch to my Thunder Cage every single time. But if you want to be the most optimal, run a Thunder Cage optimization condition and make sure you have the Thunder Cage in your hand at almost at all times, because you will be spamming abilities with Valby. And that's how you'll get the absolute most damage you can get from a reactor. Now, as you can see from my reactor, it's non-attribute dimension. I would prefer non-attribute fusion. As I said, the fusion scales higher, so fusion is better than dimension. But this is the one I have, so this isn't perfect, but this does the job. And for my substats, I have skill cooldown, which is always great, and skill critical hit damage, which is also always great. For my external components, I'm mostly going for max HP. As I said when I was going over the mods, you want to build into Valby's high HP pool, so I'm just adding on top of all this HP, along with a little defense, which I get from my annihilation sensor. Now, I'm running resistances on my external components rather than my modules, and that's because these external components that you get from doing hard mode bosses provide you with a very high fire resistance or any resistance stat. It can go upwards of 3,000, as you can see by this one right here, my annihilation sensor, which gives me 3,814 chill resistance. Now, for resistances, they're not the strongest in the game, however, they do make a difference. So I would recommend anywhere between 4,000 to 7,000 resistance. 4,000 would be okay for the hard mode bosses, it'll get you through. You mostly want to rely on defense and HP for your survivability. So getting the resistances from these external components are very big for me because it saves me module capacity, which I already lack right now. And I'm sure some of you guys are also struggling with module capacity. So it's nice to not have to slot that big resistance mod. So for my first one, I have max HP, 484 HP with the fire resistance. Then I have 4,683 defense on my sensor with the chill resistance. Then I have my 646 HP on my memory with 3,575 defense. I do have a HP support memory with electric resistance at 3,500. So if I'm going up against something like the Executioner, I would slot in a electric resistance and I would trade out the defense because the electric resistance is very nice on this. However, I'm running the Annihilation memory for almost everything else because I do get the skill duration at plus 5.7% by running the double Annihilation by my sensor and my memory. And then for my processor, I have a 646 max HP with 279 max shield. And this also gives me the 2-set effect for chill skill power. However, unfortunately, I don't do chill damage. I do non-attribute. But if I do come across a better processor, I will obviously switch that out. Ideally, a very nice set that you'd want to go for would be the Annihilation set. It's very strong. Not only do you get the skill duration, but you also get the firearm attack, which increases proportionally to the ratio of max HP to HP lost up to 26%. And when 50% of your HP is lost, or more than 50%, your MP recovery reduces by 22%, but your HP recovery increases by 16.4% for 10 seconds on a 30-second cooldown. Now, if you're having trouble with MP management, you might not want to run the full set of this. You might just want the 2 for the skill duration. The choice is yours depending on what you're struggling with in your playstyle. Now, we have pretty much covered everything that there is regarding Valby. If there's anything that I missed, feel free to let me know in the comment section. And as I said, I will be in the comment section responding to everything. If you have any questions, there may be a couple things that I missed here. There's a lot to cover, but I obviously do my best to try and cover everything and go as in-depth as possible so that way anybody can understand it. So I hope you guys enjoy the build. I hope you guys are having fun on the first Descendant. This is an amazing game. I did want to say thank you guys for all the support lately. As I said in my most recent video, it means the world to me. And you guys in the comment section have been super helpful and super nice, and I appreciate that very much. Also, thank you guys for everybody that stopped by the stream and said what's up. I've had a few of you guys come by and follow and hang out with me for a little bit, and I do appreciate that as well. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell icon if you want to be notified for more videos like this. I have an ECMO build coming up soon, and I have some pretty crazy things that I want to try with him. It may work, it may not. I also have an Enzo guide coming out. It's going to be a little bit later. The reasoning for this is there's a lot of Enzo guides out there right now that are probably pretty good, but I will be covering almost every single Descendant in this game at some point. I'm doing my best to get as many as I can. This game is quite a grind, as you guys know. So just bear with me and try to enjoy the ride. So thank you guys again. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.